This is a short demonstration of protecting Telstra CSX virtual machines to IBM BlueMix or soft layer and recovering them in soft layer also. This image represents my basic lab environment. I have two virtual machines running in Telstra CSX Utility, and I have a virtual machine Arcserve recovery point server also running in Telstra CSX Utility. I have a Telstra Cloud Gateway connection to IBM BlueMix or soft layer. And inside of soft layer, I have a second Arcserve recovery point server, which is running on the soft layer shared platform. Now, the basic setup here with the two recovery point servers gives us the ability to complete local backups of our on-premise physical and virtual servers and replicate the deduplicated data to the remote site, to the cloud. And then when we choose to, if we need to recover inside the cloud, we can provision some bare metal infrastructure and recover those backups on demand. Really gives us a cost-effective disaster recovery solution because we're not paying for excessive resources that we're not using during normal day-to-day operation. I'll start with a quick look at the Arcserve UDP console. You can see that I'm backing up 8 servers in total, and this is approximately 4.2 terabytes of recoverable data stored in about 178 gigs of disk space. So the deduplication ratio is incredible. Also on this screen, you can see I've run a couple of assured recovery tests against my backups, which obviously verify that backups are successful and can be recovered if necessary. I've completed a virtual machine recovery, and I've configured some instant VM recoveries, and all of those recoveries have met the required SLAs. This is my backup plan that I'm using to back up these two Windows servers in Telstra CSX. Task 1 is to perform an agent-based backup. So we're not relying on the hypervisor because in the Telstra CSX dedicated, we don't have access to the hypervisor. We don't need it. We choose a destination for our backups, and in this case, I'm using another recovery point server located in Telstra CSX. The recovery point server has a data store with deduplication turned on, and that's going to minimize the amount of data we have to store and also have to replicate over the network. We can then set our schedules and how often we want to back up the server. It can be obviously daily, weekly, monthly schedules, or we can do intra-day schedules as often as every 15 minutes. If you have a recovery point requirement less than every 15 minutes, then we need to look at the high availability component of Arcserve UDP, which I will look at in a later video. The second task in my backup plan is to replicate the deduplicated data from Telstra CSX to IBM BlueMix. So we get the data out of the environment using as little data transfer as possible over the cloud gateway connection. I'm replicating to a second recovery point server hosted in IBM BlueMix. It has its own data store, and it can also be receiving backup data from other locations and gain the benefit of a global deduplication for incredible reduction in the amount of stored data. The third step in the plan is to prepare or update a standby virtual machine with the content of the latest backup. This basically gives you a virtual machine that is ready to go in the event of a disaster, that is up to date with the content of the last backup. Now, this does require that a hypervisor is available for us to enable this virtual standby. So in IBM BlueMix, you could have either a VMware host or a Hyper-V host in order to provision the virtual standbys. The final step in my plan is to complete an assured recovery test. Now, in my plan, I am testing after each backup, but typically it would be a once a week kind of thing. What this is going to do is actually create a new virtual machine and boot that machine from the backup. And it's going to verify or allow you to verify that it is functioning and the backup is restorable. Often people take backups but then never verify that the backup works and that they can recover. The assured recovery testing here ensures that your backups are actually good and are usable. Now in IBM BlueMix, you have the option of producing an instant virtual machine for assured recovery testing if you have Hyper-V or VMware available. Alternatively, we can attach the replica disk as a mount point and it can be verified in that way. I'm now going to demonstrate the backup of the two Telstra CSX Windows servers. I'm going to just do a manual incremental backup, which won't take long at all. It will only take a matter of seconds once this thing gets going. So I'll select the first of the two servers and I'll bring up the details view so we can actually see what's happening. You can see there he's going through a process of taking a snapshot. And then it begins backing up the volume. And again, it is infinite incremental, so these are always very short backups compared to a full backup and take just a matter of seconds. You can see there the overall data reduction percentage is 92%. That's what we expect to see when we're using Arcserve UDP to our globally deduplicated data stores. Immediately the backup completes, task 2, the replication task begins, and if you blink you'll miss it. You can see there we're getting 96, 94% saved bandwidth because we're using the global deduplication to go from one data store to another data store. And the Arcserve block level deduplication is incredibly efficient. As soon as the data has finished transferring to the data store in IBM BlueMix, we're going to start the virtual standby task. Now, Arcserve UDP is communicating with VMware. In this case, I'm using vCenter, and it is creating a standby virtual machine or updating a standby virtual machine that is effectively ready to go, with data from the last backup. You can also see there that the next task, the fourth task, is beginning as well, which is the assured recovery test. So we're already going through the process of creating a VM and booting it from the backup in order to do the testing. Now, if I flick over to my VMware console, I can see in my assured recovery testing resource group, there's two virtual machines being created and one of them has already powered up. So I can connect to the console and view that server boot up if I wish to. Now, if I leave it to boot and ignore it, it will be shut down and removed from the console by the Arcserve UDP process. I want to look at a couple of recovery options. The first one being virtual standby. You've seen that we've prepared the standby virtual machine, and I just want to go through that process of recovering. First of all, I want to show you that we can configure the network settings for the standby virtual machine so that we can give the replica server, when it comes online, an appropriate IP address for the new network. We can also configure automatic update of our DNS servers in order to inform users of the new IP address that the server is using once it's been recovered. Now I've configured my IP settings, I can bring online the replica VM. So I'm just going to use the drop down and say standby virtual machine, and I'm going to choose the point in time that I wish to use. So these are basically showing me all of the previous backups that I've completed. I can choose to power on the virtual machine at any of those points in time. Now if I flick over to my VMware console, I can see activity and I can see that the virtual machine gets powered on. Now I've accelerated this a bit because it's going to go through detecting hardware, etc., as you normally expect, but after a very short period of time, the server is available and is online and ready to go. The second recovery technique I want to look at is called Instant VM. And this is a really great way of providing a low-cost DR solution because we don't need that bare metal host. We don't need the hypervisor, the VMware host, or the Hyper-V host sat there waiting for us and being used or not being used. We can actually provision one on demand in IBM BlueMix. Within a couple of hours, it's available, and then we can instantly recover the servers from the backup. For this demo, I'm actually using a Linux server that I'm backing up inside of IBM BlueMix. So I choose my server that I wish to recover, my recovery point from the data store, specify the session password that was used to encrypt the backup originally. I can set my hypervisor type, and in IBM BlueMix, I've got a choice of VMware vSphere or Hyper-V on Windows 2012 or 2016. I'm actually using VMware with vCenter, so I can browse my vCenter and I can see my resource groups and my host, etc. I'm just going to select the host name, click Next. For Linux, I need to specify a Linux backup server. That's not necessary on the Windows side of things, but for Linux, I need to specify that Linux backup server, which is another VM that's running with the Arcserve agent installed. And I can choose my network type, network card type. So I'll choose the high performance network card. I can choose my network IP addressing. So I can set an IP address appropriate for the new network. I also have an option here to recover the data automatically after the instant VM is started. That is basically going to pull out all of the data from the backup set and place it onto the disks that have been provisioned on the VMware host. Once I've clicked finished, Arcserve UDP is going to communicate with the vCenter in this case and create the virtual machine that is going to power on and boot from the backup set. The last little demo I wanted to include, because I think it's very relevant for people who are looking at Telstra CSX and looking at IBM BlueMix, Office 365 backup. So that's a new capability in Arcserve UDP 6.5. We now have the ability to back up emails from Office 365 out of the cloud and store them on your own recovery point server, be it in Telstra, in IBM, or on-premise, wherever. So the protection process consists of a backup plan for Office 365. So I need to provide some credentials. There's a little bit of admin work that needs to be done inside of Office 365. I choose a destination, so I have a dedicated data store to this task for Office 365. And I can then replicate to another data store at another location or wherever I want to replicate the backups to for further protection. I'll kick off a manual incremental backup again and let that process complete. Recovering the Exchange online backups is very simple. We literally just browse the recovery point that we wish to restore the data from. We can see a list of mailboxes. We can see emails that we may want to restore. Basically, you select what you want to restore, hit next, and wait for it to be done. Simple as that.